Officer Sarah Chen's morning started like any other at the Boston Police Department's Central Division. Steam rose from her fourth cup of coffee as she attempted to organize the stack of case files threatening to spill from her desk. The autumn rain tapped against the windows, creating a steady rhythm that matched the chaos of the busy precinct. Chen. Court transport in 20. Officer Mike Rodriguez called out from across the room, waving a yellow slip in the air. Sarah glanced at her watch. 8:40 a.m. Her heart rate quickened. She was already behind schedule after spending an hour dealing with a booking system malfunction. "Send it over," she called back, catching the folded paper that sailed through the air. The transport order listed a simple morning hearing for a Michael Thompson, charged with a minor offense. Simple enough, she thought, stuffing the paper into her pocket without a second glance. The precinct buzzed with its usual morning energy. Phones rang incessantly, keyboards clacked with report updates, and the scanner crackled with dispatcher calls. Sarah weaved through the maze of desks, dodging fellow officers and administrative staff as she made her way to the file room. "Sarah, got a minute?" Lieutenant Jessica Walsh stepped into her path, tablet in hand. "I need your incident report from the Harrison Street situation." "Can it wait, Lieutenant? I've got a court transport in." Sarah checked her watch again. 18 minutes. Walsh nodded, though her expression suggested the report better be on her desk by end of day. Sarah had been putting it off, knowing the Harrison Street case needed careful wording. A misunderstanding with a local business owner had escalated unnecessarily, and she was still trying to figure out how to document it diplomatically. The file room welcomed her with its familiar smell of paper and coffee-stained folders. Sarah quickly located the Thompson file, or at least what she thought was the Thompson file. The label was slightly smudged, and she squinted at it in the fluorescent lighting. Good enough, she decided, tucking it under her arm. Back at her desk, Sarah gathered her equipment. Shield, check. Radio, check. Transport paperwork. She patted her pocket, feeling the crumpled yellow slip. The morning's first transport was usually straightforward. A quick drive to the courthouse, a brief wait, then back to regular patrol duties. Chen. This time it was Sergeant Peters, his voice carrying across the bullpen. "Did you get the updated booking photo for your transport?" Sarah's hand froze on her gear belt. "Updated photo." "System's been glitching since 5 a.m. It says some files might be mismatched." Peters shrugged, already turning back to his computer screen. "Probably nothing, but check the hard copy to be safe." She should have gone back to verify the photo. She should have double-checked the booking number. She should have done a lot of things, but the wall clock now read 8:52 a.m., and the courthouse had strict arrival times. Missing the window meant paperwork, lots of it, and possibly a reprimand. Sarah made a split-second decision. The booking photo could wait. She'd dealt with dozens of routine transports before. Besides, how many Michael Thompsons could there be in holding on a Tuesday morning? Grabbing her keys from the desk drawer, she hurried toward the detention area. Officer Rodriguez passed her in the hallway, giving her a thumbs up. "Better hustle, Chen. Judge Martinez hates tardiness. Remember last month when Davis was late?" Everyone remembered. Davis had spent the next 3 weekends on parking duty after keeping the judge waiting for 7 minutes. The detention area door buzzed open, and Sarah stepped into the fluorescent-lit corridor. Her boots squeaked against the freshly mopped floor as she approached the holding cells. The morning's decision, to rush rather than double-check, would soon prove to be the kind of mistake that could either end a career or, surprisingly, make it more meaningful than she could have imagined. The holding area's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the cell block as Sarah approached. Most morning detainees wore the previous night's rumpled clothes or standard-issue jumpsuits, but the man in cell 3 stood out like a beacon. His charcoal gray suit looked fresh from the dry cleaners, and his leather Oxford shoes gleamed under the institutional lighting. Sarah checked the number on her paperwork against the cell designation. "Mr. Thompson?" she called out, maintaining her professional tone. The man turned from his contemplation of the cell's back wall, revealing a clean-shaven face and wire-rimmed glasses that probably cost more than her weekly salary. "Yes, officer." His voice carried a quiet confidence that seemed oddly out of place in the holding cell. Sarah noticed his perfect posture and the way he clasped his hands behind his back, more like an executive in a boardroom than someone facing a court appearance. Something nagged at the back of her mind. The booking slip listed a drunk and disorderly charge, but this man looked more likely to argue corporate law than start a bar fight. Still, Sarah had learned in her 3 years on the force that appearances could be deceiving. Hands forward, please. Standard procedure for transport. She held up the handcuffs, their metal surface reflecting the harsh lighting. Thompson's eyebrow arched slightly, but he complied without comment, extending his arms through the cell's food slot with practiced ease that seemed strange for someone supposedly unfamiliar with arrests. As Sarah secured the cuffs, she noticed his manicured nails and the subtle scent of expensive cologne. A gold signet ring adorned his right hand, definitely not department store jewelry. Too tight, she asked, following protocol. Not at all, Thompson replied, a hint of amusement dancing in his eyes. You seem quite proficient at this, Officer Chen. He gestured toward her nameplate with his cuffed hands. Sarah felt a small chill. Most detainees didn't notice such details, let alone comment on them. She quickly checked his restraints one final time before signaling the desk officer to open the cell door. If you don't mind my asking, Thompson said as they walked down the corridor, his dress shoes clicking against the linoleum, is Judge Martinez still presiding in Courtroom 3? The question stopped Sarah in her tracks. Detainees didn't usually know judge assignments. She glanced at her paperwork again, but the courtroom number was clearly printed. Courtroom 3, Judge Martinez presiding. Standard procedure prevents me from discussing court details during transport, she replied, falling back on protocol. Thompson nodded, that same mysterious smile playing at the corners of his mouth. They passed the booking desk, where Officer Rodriguez was processing a new arrival. He looked up, did a double take, and opened his mouth as if to speak. Before he could say anything, his phone rang, pulling his attention away. The walk through the precinct drew curious glances. Thompson moved with the confidence of someone who belonged there, nodding pleasantly to passing officers as if he were leading the escort rather than being led. Sarah found herself unconsciously matching his measured pace. Interesting morning for a court appearance, Thompson commented as they approached the transport entrance. The autumn rain had intensified, drumming against the metal awning. Though I suppose every morning in court is interesting in its own way. Sarah retrieved her department umbrella from the stand. Sir, I need you to remain silent during transport. The words came out more uncertain than she intended. Something about this situation felt increasingly off-kilter, like a puzzle piece that looked right but wouldn't quite fit. As they waited for the transport car to pull around, Thompson glanced at his wristwatch, a movement made awkward by the handcuffs. 8:57, he mused aloud. Perfect timing, actually, though not quite in the way anyone expected. Sarah would soon realize just how prophetic those words were. As the transport car's wipers swept across the windshield in a steady rhythm, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something obvious, something that would become embarrassingly clear in about 15 minutes. The courthouse corridors buzzed with the usual morning activity as Sarah escorted Thompson through security. The metal detector beeped softly at his cufflinks. Platinum, the security officer noted with a puzzled glance. The protocol demanded they remain in place for his court appearance. Courtroom 3 is ready for the Thompson case, a court clerk announced, hurrying past with an armful of files. She did a double take at Thompson, her steps faltering. Mr. Thompson, but I thought. She shook her head and rushed on, leaving her sentence unfinished. Sarah guided her charge toward the designated courtroom, her unease growing with each step. The legal professionals they passed kept giving Thompson odd looks, and several whispered to each other behind cupped hands. A young paralegal actually dropped her coffee cup, fortunately empty when they walked by. Last chance, Officer Chen, Thompson said quietly as they reached the courtroom doors. His tone was gentle, almost sympathetic. Sarah squared her shoulders, interpreting his words as an attempt to delay proceedings. She'd heard every excuse in the book from defendants trying to postpone their hearings. The bailiff pulled open the heavy wooden doors, and Sarah led Thompson into Courtroom 3. The room was packed with the usual morning crowd. Attorneys checking phones, clerks organizing files, members of the public seated in the gallery. Judge Martinez sat at her bench, reading through documents with her characteristic focused expression. "The Thompson case, Your Honor," Sarah announced clearly, following standard procedure. The judge glanced up, then froze. Her reading glasses slipped down her nose as she stared at the man in handcuffs. "Michael?" Judge Martinez's voice carried equal parts disbelief and growing amusement. "Would you care to explain why you're on the wrong side of the courtroom? And in handcuffs, no less." Sarah's stomach dropped as the judge's words registered. "Wrong side of the courtroom." "Well, Your Honor," Thompson replied, his professional tone unchanged despite the handcuffs. "I was actually hoping to present the state's case in Courtroom 4 at 9:30, but it seems there's been a slight misunderstanding with my morning schedule." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. A silver-haired man in an expensive suit stood up from the gallery. "That's my co-counsel in handcuffs, Your Honor. We're due to present the Brighton case in 15 minutes. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face as reality crashed down. She'd arrested a federal prosecutor. She put handcuffs on an officer of the court. Officer. Judge Martinez's voice cut through Sarah's spiraling thoughts. Would I be correct in assuming there's another Michael Thompson waiting in a cell back at the precinct? One who's actually scheduled for a hearing in my courtroom this morning. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her handcuff keys. Yes, Your Honor. There appears to be a serious mistake." The cuffs clicked open, and Prosecutor Thompson rubbed his wrists reflexively, though Sarah had been careful not to make them too tight. "Well," the judge said, removing her glasses, "in 20 years on the bench, this is certainly a first." She turned to her clerk. "Please contact Central Booking and sort out this situation with the other Mr. Thompson." Looking back at the prosecutor, she added, "Michael, I trust you can still make your 9:30 appearance." "Absolutely, Your Honor," Thompson replied, straightening his tie. "Though I may need a moment to remove the remnants of my brief incarceration." A ripple of laughter swept through the courtroom, breaking the tension. Sarah stood rooted to the spot, her career flashing before her eyes. She barely registered Thompson turning toward her, his expression surprisingly kind. "Officer Chen," he said just loud enough for those nearby to hear, "I believe this is the beginning of a very interesting conversation about booking procedures. But first, I have a case to present. Perhaps we could discuss this over coffee later. I have a feeling both of us could use some by then." The next hour passed in a blur of incident reports and explanations. Sarah sat in Lieutenant Garcia's office. Her usual perfect posture slumped slightly as she faced both her supervisor and Captain Reynolds. The morning rain continued its steady rhythm against the window, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside. "Let me get this straight," Garcia said, pinching the bridge of his nose. "You transported a federal prosecutor, one who's handling the biggest racketeering case this year, in handcuffs, while the actual suspect sat in his cell reading yesterday's newspaper." "Yes, sir," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. Her training kicked in, keeping her professional even as she documented her own mistake. "I failed to properly verify identity beyond the name match, and I take full responsibility for the error." Captain Reynolds leaned forward, his weathered face serious but not unkind. "Officer Chen, your record has been exemplary until now. 3 commendations in as many years. But this," he gestured to the preliminary incident report on his tablet, "this is the kind of mistake that makes headlines." As if on cue, Garcia's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and groaned. Speaking of headlines, the press already caught wind of it. Someone in the courthouse couldn't resist sharing the story. Social media's having a field day. Sarah's stomach tightened. She could already imagine the memes and jokes spreading across the internet. Her mistake wouldn't just be a departmental issue. It would be public entertainment. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Officer Rodriguez stepped in, looking uncomfortable. "Sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this." He handed his phone to Garcia, who read the screen and raised his eyebrows. Well, this is unexpected, Garcia said, passing the phone to Captain Reynolds. Prosecutor Thompson just gave an impromptu press statement outside the courthouse. He's actually defending our department. Reynolds read aloud. This morning's incident, while unfortunate, highlights the immense pressure our law enforcement officers face daily. Officer Chen's professional conduct throughout the misunderstanding actually demonstrates the high standards of the Boston PD. I look forward to working with the department to improve identification protocols. Sarah blinked in surprise. She'd expected Thompson to be furious, to demand her badge, or at least file a formal complaint. Instead, he was publicly supporting her. There's more, Rodriguez added. He's requesting a meeting with the commissioner this afternoon. Says he has suggestions for preventing similar incidents in the future. The office fell silent as everyone processed this development. Finally, Captain Reynolds spoke. Chen, you're on administrative duty pending a full review. But, he paused, studying her face, it seems you found an unexpected ally in Prosecutor Thompson. What I don't understand, Garcia interjected, is why he played along for so long. He could have identified himself immediately in the holding cell. Sarah remembered Thompson's subtle hints, his knowing smile, the way he'd given her multiple chances to realize her mistake. I think he saw it as a learning opportunity, sir, for all of us. A new knock at the door revealed Officer Martinez, looking slightly frazzled. The actual Michael Thompson is ready for transport, but he's asking why we made him wait while we took some fancy lawyer on a field trip. His words, not mine. Despite the tension, Garcia couldn't suppress a small smile. At least our original suspect has a sense of humor about it. Get him to court, Martinez, and triple-check his ID first. Sarah stood, ready to begin her administrative duty assignment, but Captain Reynolds held up his hand. One more thing, Chen. Prosecutor Thompson left his card. Said to call him once you're done here. Something about coffee and a conversation about booking procedures. As Sarah left the office, she felt a glimmer of hope through her embarrassment. Her mistake might have gone viral, but it had also caught the attention of someone who could help turn it into positive change. Sometimes, she reflected, the worst moments led to the best opportunities, even if those opportunities came with handcuffs and a heaping serving of humble pie. The coffee shop across from the courthouse buzzed with its usual afternoon crowd, but Sarah noticed how conversations hushed slightly as she walked in. News traveled fast in the legal district, and she'd already seen her morning mishap trending on local social media. She spotted Prosecutor Thompson at a corner table, his suit jacket draped over the chair and sleeves rolled up, making him look more approachable than he had in handcuffs. Officer Chen, he stood as she approached, gesturing to the chair across from him. I took the liberty of ordering you a cappuccino. I noticed the coffee cup on your desk during my brief stay in Holdings, same brand. Sarah sat down, momentarily thrown by his attention to detail. Mr. Thompson, I want to formally apologize for this morning's incident. My lack of proper verification procedures was unprofessional and... He held up a hand, smiling. Sarah. May I call you Sarah? Do you know what happened on my first day as a prosecutor 12 years ago? When she shook her head, he continued, I showed up at the wrong courthouse. Not just the wrong building. I was in the wrong city. Drove all the way to Worcester instead of Boston. The mental image of the polished prosecutor lost in the wrong city helped ease some of her tension. How did that happen? Same way most mistakes do. Rushing, pressure, and a dash of misplaced confidence. He took a sip of his coffee. But here's what I learned that day. Sometimes our most embarrassing moments become our most valuable teaching tools. A waitress delivered Sarah's cappuccino, along with a plate of biscotti that Thompson had ordered. The thing is, he continued, your mistake this morning highlighted something I've been concerned about for months. Our booking and identification systems are outdated, relying too heavily on basic name matches and overworked officers doing their best with inadequate tools. Sarah thought about the glitching booking system, the smudged labels, the pressure to make transport deadlines. The system does have gaps, she admitted, but most days we manage to get the right people to the right places. Most days isn't good enough when we're dealing with people's freedom, Thompson replied, his expression turning serious. What if instead of taking a federal prosecutor to court, someone accidentally released a dangerous suspect because of a name mix-up? The implication sent a chill down Sarah's spine. Her mistake, embarrassing as it was, could have been much worse under different circumstances. Here's what I'm proposing. Thompson pulled out his tablet, showing her a preliminary proposal. A joint task force between the DA's office and the police department. We need to modernize the booking system, implement biometric verification, and create foolproof identification protocols. And I want you to be part of it. Sarah nearly choked on her coffee. Me? But I'm the one who made the mistake in the first place. Exactly, Thompson smiled. Who better to help design a better system than someone who's experienced its flaws firsthand? Besides, you handled the situation with remarkable professionalism. Even in handcuffs, I noticed your attention to procedure and concern for safety. A group of lawyers walked past their table, doing double takes at seeing the morning's viral sensation having coffee with her accidental arrestee. Thompson noticed her discomfort and leaned forward. Listen, this morning's incident will be old news by next week. But the changes we could make to the system, those could last for years and prevent much more serious mistakes. So, what do you say? Ready to turn an embarrassing moment into something meaningful? Sarah looked at the proposal, then back at Thompson's earnest expression. She thought about all the officers like her, rushing through bookings and transports, one name mix-up away from disaster. Maybe this was why she'd become a police officer in the first place, not just to follow procedures, but to improve them. Where do we start? She asked, reaching for the tablet. 2 weeks after the infamous handcuffing incident, Sarah found herself standing in front of the police commissioner and a room full of precinct captains. The department's largest conference room buzzed with anticipation as she and Thompson prepared to present their proposed changes to the booking system. Ready for this? Thompson asked quietly, adjusting the presentation display. Sarah smoothed her freshly pressed uniform, taking comfort in its familiar feel. The past 14 days had been a whirlwind of research, meetings, and late-night planning sessions. As ready as I'll be, she replied, noticing how their initial awkwardness had evolved into an easy professional rapport. The local paper had dubbed them the unlikely reform team after their story went viral, but their partnership had proven surprisingly effective. Commissioner Bradley called the meeting to order, and Thompson stepped forward. Ladies and gentlemen, 2 weeks ago, I experienced our current booking system from a rather unique perspective. A ripple of knowing laughter moved through the room. But what could have been a simple, embarrassing incident has revealed serious systemic vulnerabilities. Sarah advanced to the first slide, showing statistics they'd gathered. In the past year alone, we've had 27 near misses with misidentified suspects, she explained, her voice growing confident as she shared their findings. While most were caught in time, each represents a potential risk to public safety and justice. The room grew quiet as the implications sank in. Thompson took over, outlining their proposed solutions. We're not just talking about adding new technology, he emphasized. We're talking about reimagining the entire process from arrest to courtroom. Sarah clicked to the next slide, revealing their pilot program design. The new system combined biometric verification with streamlined digital processing, all while maintaining necessary security protocols. They'd spent countless hours ensuring it would work within budget constraints and existing department infrastructure. Officer Chen identified 7 critical points where identification verification typically fails. Thompson continued, nodding towards Sarah. Her insights from years of field experience proved invaluable in designing these solutions. Commissioner Bradley leaned forward, studying the proposal. The cost of implementation. Less than what we'd face from one wrongful detention lawsuit, Sarah replied promptly. She'd anticipated this question and prepared thoroughly. We've already received preliminary approval from the City Council for the pilot program funding. A captain from the back raised her hand. And you've tested this system. Thompson smiled. Actually, we have a demonstration prepared. Officer Chen? Sarah pulled out her tablet, showing their working prototype. The room's energy shifted from skepticism to interest as she walked them through the streamlined process. "This could work," Commissioner Bradley said slowly, studying the preliminary results. "But implementing it across all precincts will be challenging. We'll need someone to oversee the transition, train personnel." "Officer Chen would be perfect for that role," Thompson interjected. Sarah's head snapped up in surprise. They hadn't discussed this. She understands both the old system's flaws and the new system's potential. Plus, she's already earned the respect of officers across precincts through her handling of this situation. The commissioner nodded thoughtfully. "Chen, would you be interested in heading up this project? It would mean a temporary reassignment from regular patrol duties." Sarah felt all eyes in the room turn to her. 2 weeks ago, she thought her career might be over. Now she was being offered a chance to make a real difference in departmental operations. She met Thompson's encouraging gaze before responding. "Yes, sir. I would be honored to lead this initiative." As the meeting concluded with enthusiastic support for their pilot program, Thompson gathered their materials. "Dinner to celebrate," he suggested. "I know a great place that doesn't require handcuffs for entry." Sarah laughed, her earlier nervousness completely gone. "Only if you promise to keep working with us on the implementation phase. We're going to need that legal perspective to make sure everything holds up in court." "Wouldn't miss it," Thompson replied. "Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't accidentally arrest any more prosecutors." 3 months into the pilot program, Sarah stood in the newly renovated booking area of Central Division, watching officers process arrests using the system she'd helped design. The space hummed with efficiency. Gone were the stacks of paper files and smudged labels, replaced by streamlined digital workstations and biometric scanners. "Officer Chen." A rookie named Martinez approached, tablet in hand. The new facial recognition system flagged something interesting. "We've got 2 John Smiths in holding, and it turns out one of them has been using his brother's identity." Sarah moved to the booking station, noting how confidently Martinez navigated the new interface. Good catch. The old system would have missed that entirely. She remembered her own mistake with Thompson, now a teaching point in their training sessions. Always trust the biometrics over the verbal identification. The department had transformed over the past months. What started as one officer's embarrassing mistake had sparked a technological revolution in booking procedures. Every arrest now went through triple verification, biometric, digital, and human oversight working in harmony. Speaking of catches, Thompson's familiar voice came from behind her. "Your new system just prevented a potential disaster in Worcester." He'd become a regular presence of the precinct, ensuring the legal framework of their reforms remained solid. They almost released the wrong person on bail yesterday, but the cross-reference alert caught the error. Sarah turned, noticing he brought coffee, their unofficial tradition since that first planning meeting. "Worcester's already implementing the system. I thought they were waiting until next quarter." "They fast-tracked it after seeing our success rates," Thompson replied, handing her a cup. "By the way, the state police commissioner called. They want you to present at next month's law enforcement conference. Apparently, departments across the country are interested in our model." The thought of presenting to state police commissioners would have terrified Sarah 3 months ago. Now she felt ready. She had already trained officers from 12 precincts, turning skeptics into advocates with her straightforward approach and real-world examples. "Officer Chen." This time it was Sergeant Peters calling from the dispatch desk. "You've got to see this. The new transport tracking system just caught a scheduling conflict before it happened." 2 defendants with similar names headed to different courthouses. Sarah and Thompson exchanged knowing looks. That particular scenario hit close to home. They walked over to observe as Peters demonstrated how the system had prevented the mix-up. "Remember when we used to just write court assignments on those yellow slips?" Peters shook his head. "Can't believe we operated like that for so long." The afternoon brought a surprise visit from Commissioner Bradley, who'd become one of their strongest supporters. "Chen, Thompson," he nodded to them both. "The mayor's office just called. They want to feature our new booking system in their public safety initiative. Seems you two have started quite the revolution in law enforcement procedures. Just trying to prevent future prosecutors from experiencing life on the wrong side of the handcuffs, sir, Thompson joked, but his pride in their accomplishments was evident. Sarah watched as another officer successfully processed a complex booking involving twins with similar names, a scenario that would have been a nightmare under the old system. The new facial recognition software, combined with fingerprint verification and their enhanced database, handled it flawlessly. You know, she said to Thompson as they observed the booking area's smooth operation, sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I double-checked your identity that morning. Then some other officer would have made a similar mistake eventually, he replied, but they might not have had your dedication to fixing the underlying problem. Sometimes the right mistake has to happen to the right person at the right time. Sarah nodded, understanding now that her greatest professional embarrassment had led to her most significant achievement. As she watched another successful booking, she couldn't help but smile at the irony. Her moment of imperfection had led to a system designed to prevent precisely that kind of error. 1 year after the handcuffing incident, the Boston Police Department's annual awards ceremony took on special significance. The grand ballroom of the Marriott bustled with officers in dress uniforms and dignitaries in formal attire. Sarah sat at the front table, still somewhat amazed by how much had changed in 12 months. And now, Commissioner Bradley announced from the podium the department's Innovation Excellence Award. This year's recipient transformed a potentially career-ending mistake into a revolutionary improvement in law enforcement procedures. Her booking system modernization program has been adopted by 37 departments across 6 states, with more joining every month. Sarah felt Thompson give her shoulder a supportive squeeze from the seat next to her. They developed an easy friendship over the past year, their weekly coffee meetings evolving from project discussions to genuine camaraderie. Officer Sarah Chen, the commissioner continued, "Please come forward." As Sarah approached the podium, she caught glimpses of familiar faces. Lieutenant Garcia beamed proudly. He'd become one of her strongest advocates after seeing how she'd handled the aftermath of her mistake. Officer Rodriguez gave her a thumbs up. He'd been the first to volunteer for testing the new system. "Thank you, Commissioner," Sarah began, adjusting the microphone. "But this award really belongs to everyone who helped turn an embarrassing morning into lasting change." She turned to Thompson. "Especially to the very patient federal prosecutor who decided that being mistakenly arrested was a perfect opportunity to improve our justice system." Laughter rippled through the crowd. The story had become department legend, shared with every new recruit as an example of how to turn adversity into opportunity. 1 year ago, Sarah continued, "I thought I'd made a mistake that would end my career. Instead, it showed me how many dedicated professionals in law enforcement were ready to embrace change. Our new booking system isn't just about preventing errors, it's about showing that every challenge is an opportunity to do better." After the ceremony, Sarah and Thompson found themselves in their favorite coffee shop across from the courthouse. The same corner table was available. They'd become such regulars that the staff kept it open for them during their usual meeting times. "So," Thompson said, stirring his coffee, ready to tell me the real story. Sarah looked up, puzzled. "What real story?" "Oh, come on," he smiled. "We've worked together for a year. I know you're too thorough to have made that mistake by accident. Part of me has always wondered if you recognized me that morning and saw an opportunity to push for the changes you knew we needed." Sarah laughed, shaking her head. "I wish I could claim that kind of strategic thinking, but no. I really did mess up. Sometimes the best opportunities come from genuine mistakes." "Well," Thompson raised his covenant toast, "here's to productive mistakes. By the way, the FBI called. They want to look at implementing your system at the federal level." Sarah nearly choked on her cappuccino. "The FBI. That's ironic," Thompson finished. "The agency whose prosecutor you accidentally arrested now wants to follow your lead on booking procedures. Life has a sense of humor." Through the coffee shop window, they could see officers and legal professionals hurrying about their day, all of them now benefiting from systems that grew from one officer's willingness to learn from her mistakes. You know what the best part is? Sarah said, watching a rookie officer efficiently process a booking on his tablet outside. Nobody will ever have to go through what I did that morning. No officer will have to face that moment of horror when they realize they got the wrong person. True, Thompson nodded, then added with a grin, though I have to admit, getting arrested that day was probably the most productive thing that's happened in my career. Even if the handcuffs did wrinkle my suit. As they shared a laugh, Sarah reflected on how a moment that should have destroyed her career had instead defined it. Sometimes she realized the measure of a person isn't in their mistakes, but in what they choose to build from them.